So in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about top 12 mistakes that you can make while acquiring a company. So I've got my notes here so that we are on track. And these mistakes is something I've seen over and over again, particularly with people who are starting out new. They don't have a mentor, they don't have the information. Maybe they're watching the free information and they don't have the model quite in their minds clearly. They have it in pieces, scattered all over the place, because let's face it, online it is a little bit scattered. So if you are someone who's interested in acquiring $1 million company, a profitable company, then these top 12 mistakes is something that you have to look out for. So let's get started. Number one, and this is one of my favorites, is the wrong region. You know, a lot of the success, and this is something that President Donald Trump talked about, is the region. You know, just getting born in the right region or being positioned in the right region is going to open up a lot of doors. How many times have you known somebody who was not growing and they were just feeling restricted and they were not in their peak capacity, and the moment they go to a different region, all of a sudden you see that they've changed completely and they've become successful? Well, region has an important role to play. There are laws, which is a big factor in business, financing, deal flow. So in this business model, there are several aspects that you look for when you look at a region. So I'm going to cover that. You need to have enough banks in the region and you need to have enough deals. If you have these two in that region, then it's a good region. And you want the banks to have the ability to finance deals. And you cannot have corruption in the region. You know, you want the governments to be efficient. You want the court systems to be efficient. You know, you can't have corruption in the court, or the court system cannot be too bureaucratic, and it should not take too long to settle a case. For example, in India, it can take up to 15 to 20 years to settle a business lawsuit. And that's obviously a big chunk of life. So you don't want that. Another aspect would be cash economy would be a red flag. So if the region has a cash economy, meaning not everything is transparent in a bank statement or on financial statements, there is a cash economy. People are transacting too much in cash, you know, hard cash, to avoid paying taxes. One country that comes to mind is Greece. You know, in Greece, a lot of the people are not reporting their numbers, you know, and the government is not able to enforce the tax laws because there is a whole cash economy. There's a way of doing business where people just collect cash. And this is a case that came to me. It was a dental clinic. One branch was in Dubai and one branch was in Greece. And I told the Greek doctors, hey, why don't we just look at both the clinics? And then he himself, he was an honest guy. He said, Prithvi, you would not be able to audit the Greek business. And I said, no, we have top advisors, you know, no problem, we'll be able to do it. And then he says, Prithvi, trust me, you won't be able to do it. And then I said, okay, let me ask my corporate finance director and I'll let you know. And then I went to my corporate finance director and I asked him, you know, Jesus, you know, what, you know, we have a good clinic. I have a good news. We have a clinic in Greece also. These guys have a clinic in Greece. And he said, Prithvi, Greece, forget about it. I said, why? Why do you talk like this? I mean, you were in PwC. I mean, you're Superman, right? He says, no, you know, you can't audit a company where everything is in cash and the whole thing is disaster. You cannot audit companies. So that's going to be a red flag. Less deals, less banks or no banks or financing available, and no way to audit the company. So these three would be the big ones. There are many other factors in the region, and corrupt courts. It can't have corrupt courts. So it has fair judicial system, enough banks, enough deals. And if you have these three, and not cashless economy, but at least transparency. You want the tax authorities to be efficient so that they have proper tax returns so you can analyze the business. They should have proper bank statements so you can analyze the business. And that's about the region. Okay, so number two is going to be the wrong industry. Okay, a lot of the success just comes from being in the right industry. My brother, he trained to be a pilot, and he knew how to fly planes, and he came back, and the airline industry is one of the worst industries on the planet, because the infrastructure is very big, the cost of flight is very high, cost of plane is very high, and the margins are very low. And the moment recession hits, oil price fluctuates, and the entire airline business gets into trouble. So airline industry is bad. Now this is from the standpoint of getting into business and from the standpoint of getting a job. So, and because when a company starts to go down, starts to go into a loss, the first thing they do is fire employees. So all of those issues are related to an industry. So you don't want to go into an industry that has small margin. That's the word here, the small margin. And you don't want an industry which is vulnerable to cycles, economic cycles. Now you may say all industries are vulnerable to economic cycles, but that's not true. Certain industries are far more vulnerable. Healthcare is not vulnerable to industry cycles. I mean, healthcare is probably the only industry that made money during COVID, and I've seen some of the numbers. Not just the vaccines, but even cosmetic surgeons in UAE were making money. Dentists were making money. Yes, there was a lockdown of a few months, but because the margin is so big in these companies, they had cash reserves to sustain that downfall. And that's what happens when the margin is big and your expenses are low, your personal expenses of the owner is low, then there is a lot of cash accumulation that happens in a high margin business. So if the business goes down, the company can sustain itself maybe for a year, sometimes 2 years, sometimes 3 years with just the cash they have in the bank. That happened during the accumulation of which happened during the past 5 years or 10 years. And a good entrepreneur always keep big reserves in case of recession or a big down cycle. So that can happen in a high margin business. In a low margin business, there's very little cash that gets accumulated, and most of it is reinvested to sustain the infrastructure. And typically, low margin businesses are infrastructure heavy. So planes would be another example. Would be one example. What I said, it takes a lot of maintenance, a lot of costs. Costs are high because of the infrastructure. Oil and gas is also profitable, but still low margin compared to healthcare. So that's another one. So every time I see an infrastructure heavy industry that somebody wants to get into, I have a lot of people come to me. They say they want to roll up restaurants, which is one of the worst businesses to get into. In business, there is a saying, if you want to go broke, open a restaurant, because it's the most common skill out there is cooking. And food, there is not much margin that you can make, and it's very complicated to make food and manage the staff and manage the restaurant, especially on a low margin. It's high competition. So the leverage keeps moving with the chef. Wherever the chef goes, that restaurant starts to prosper. I mean, the whole business is very shaky. So I wouldn't recommend restaurants. So wrong industry. And remember, you are going to be loading up debt on these companies to buy these companies. So you want the margin to be big of the profit, because anyway, half of it or a little more than that is going to go towards paying debt. So even if you acquire a big margin company, it's going to go, the margins are going to shrink because you're loading it with debt. So all the more reason to have a big margin. And if you don't have a big margin, the banks are not going to finance it because they can see the company is going to be in a vulnerable position. I had somebody who owned a restaurant who came to me for advice. He was making $1 million in revenue, but $100,000 in profit. So imagine, he was making $100,000 in profit, but his revenue was $1 million. He might as well have a job and not worry about all the headache that comes with managing a restaurant. So low margin businesses, avoid. The other aspect of the industry, again, you don't have enough targets to buy. If you have 50 companies in total in your region, then you will run out of those 50 companies in one day. I could make 50 phone calls in one day. So, and the region is over? No. You want the region, you want to choose an industry which has a lot of targets, thousands of targets, thousands, so that you have room to call thousands of people. Not everybody is going to say yes. Not every company is going to be profitable. Not every owner will agree on the right price. Not every owner is going to accept your offer. You need a lot of companies. You want a big market. You want a lot of companies that are there in the region. Another example of a wrong industry would be an industry which has young owners. If an owner is young and he has his whole life to live, he's not going to sell you his company at 3 to 5 times profit. I'm sorry, that's not going to happen, because he can just live that long and make that money, and he doesn't need to retire. So that's a problem. So if you have an industry like tech, for example, old people are not good with technology. Young people are good with technology, and young people have been surrounded with technology. So I know technology is hot, it's big margin, but the owners are not young enough, because of which they would want higher prices, and you can't finance a deal if it's priced really at exorbitant multiples. So you can't really finance a deal which is priced really high. So that would be a big red flag. Is yes, you have deals, yes, it's big margin, but the price that they want on an average is too much. So you want old school industries, old school industries that may have 60 to 70 year or even 80-year-old owners, lots of deals available, big, big market, and that's how you choose the industry, and big margin. So that's how you, so our criteria is big profit margin and low purchase price. That's the recipe. You want big margin and a company you can acquire at a discounted price. Well, you're not going to acquire a company from a young guy at a discounted price. You're only going to acquire a company at a discounted price from a much older owner who's nearing retirement, and he doesn't care what he gets. So that's how you choose the industry. So wrong industry is a big one. Then you have building the project on savings. That's a third mistake. Building the project on your savings, Tom Cruise style, in Mission Impossible, where everything is neck to neck, just last moment everything happens, and all the Christmas lights go on all at the same time, and you're just building, and you're just neck to neck, and you're about to run out of money, you can go homeless. You don't want to build a project like that. You want to have enough savings, you want enough coverage, and no amount of savings, unless you have millions of dollars in the bank, is going to be enough for you to stop everything you're doing and build the project. You need an income. Why do you need an income? Because you don't know when you're going to buy your first company. Even if you buy your first company, you don't know if the cash flow from your first acquisition is going to be enough to cover your expenses. You don't know that. So there is a lot of things you don't know when you're starting out, and to bet, to give up all the income that you have from the job and just build this on $50,000 is not wise. You are going to run out of money. And another thing is, as you're running out of money, the desperation to do the deal increases. And when you want to do a deal bad enough, you'll do a bad deal. That's what my mentor Dan Pena says. So you can't put yourself in a desperate position. Have you been really desperate for a girl, like really attractive girl, and she's in front of you and you start wobbling? You don't want to get in that position, So same thing happens with money, and it may happen even worse with money, because it's a question of your survival. So, and it's going to be painful, frankly, and the owner will see it on your face. The board members are going to see it on your face. The bankers are going to see it on your face, and they're going to make you sign a personal guarantee, or the owner is going to ask you for too much price. You will say yes, or he'll ask you for all cash up front. And because you don't have the time, because you don't have enough cash in the bank, you don't have enough time to look for another deal. If it's a bad deal, then you will say, oh, I don't have enough time because I don't have enough cash to look for another deal. So this is the deal I have. It's not a good deal, but let me jump on it because I'll not be able to pay my expenses and I'll be thrown out of my house. So just let's say yes to whatever the seller asks me to. Big mistake. You can't put yourself in that position. And then you've acquired a company at an exorbitant price. You've given all the cash to the owner. The whole deal is stacked in his favor. So that's not how you want to structure the deal. You want to be in a comfortable position where your survival is paid for. You're not going to be thrown out of your house if this deal didn't close. Nothing's going to happen. You're just going to be fine. If you have a family, your family is going to be fine, and you're playing a game. So this acquisition business is a game. This is not for your survival. Yes, you can buy nice things. Yes, it's going to enhance your survival, but this is not about eating food. That has to come from a different source up front. Yes, once you have a few acquisitions, you will have enough income to also finance your survival, but that will take time. You don't know how much time it's going to take, because you have to have the board members saying yes and intact. Some of them can leave. You have the banks who have to say yes, and banks have a bureaucratic process. You need multiple yeses in a lot of the cases. You want the seller, sometimes they will have a few partners in the business, 2 or 3. All of them have to say yes. And guess what? Some of them have wives that don't want them to sell the company. Some of them have kids that don't want them to sell the company. Some of them will have advisors that will poison their ears at the last minute. So yes, they signed the paper with you, the LOI, and after some time, their son came and said, Daddy, I have changed my mind that I want to do my own thing in my life. I actually think that your business is pretty cool and I would like to inherit it. So please don't sell it. And then they won't sell it. So you have many vested interests in a person. I want you to look at the person and not think that this person is one person. I mean, that person is connected to many other people who have vested interest in the decisions that this person makes. So there are too many variables here. Things can change last minute. It's very typical in M&A deal. You think it's about to close and then something happens last minute. So that's why you need many deals in the pipeline, and that takes time. And to finance that time, you need a job. It can't be done on savings, again, unless you have many hundreds of thousands or millions. So keep that in mind. It's a big mistake. Number 4 is going to the investors. So now you don't have the money and now you want to go to the investor. Investor capital is not for you to spend on personal expenses. Investor capital is typically designed for expansion, meaning you have a profitable business and you want to expand the business faster than your competitors, so you get investors. So you have already some experience, some track record, some cash flow. Because this capital, investor capital, is a headache. You have to give this back with a return. Investor is not your friend. He expects a return. So if you go to the investor prematurely, how are you going to value the company? What is the basis of the investment? What's the value of the company? Value of the company is typically calculated by the cash flows of the company. At the beginning, you don't have any cash flows. So what's the value of the company? You have to invent something out of thin air based on some future projections. So you're not going to have the best valuation, meaning if the investor invests money, you're going to have to give up most of the shares to that investor. They're going to control you. And then you have to, work, and you have very small shares in the company. And then once the project gets built, since you're a minority, they don't need you. Once it's built, they throw you out. So you don't want to go to the investors prematurely. That's why it's important to have a source of income. Either it's a job, small business, maybe you're self-employed freelancer. However you're paying your expenses, pay the expenses and reduce your time that you spend on this job to pay your expenses. So, but you don't go to the investors prematurely. You don't have anything on the table. So don't go to the investors. These people are sharks. They will consume your project. Okay. So be careful with that. It's a big common mistake. Just because there's Shark Tank, on Shark Tank, people go to get investors doesn't mean you should. Number 5 would be not having a board. This is my favorite one. There is a big saying these days that building a board is not necessary. It's an outdated step. things have changed. Dan Pena is not in touch with reality. Maybe he's gotten old and his methods are over and he's not in touch with the current market. And of course, you want to be ahead of the curve. You want to be updated with the current strategies and market. Big mistake. You can't be an expert in corporate finance, at the same time accounting, at the same time law, at the same time healthcare operations or whichever industry you want to get into. Let's say it's oil and gas, an oil and gas expert. All of these hats cannot be on your shoulders, and these are important functions of the company that you're going to be creating. This is not a joke. You need advice. You need advice from each function. Corporate finance is a very complicated function. Accounting is a complicated function. There is a thing called IFRS, International Financial Reporting Standards, or GAAP, Generally Accepted Accounting Principles in the US. There are professionals who have trained for many years to understand these laws. Tax laws is another one that they have spent time. Operations is another one. Okay, so law is another one. M&A law is a completely different from litigation or criminal law. So you need somebody from M&A law, corporate finance, because you're structuring legal agreements. I mean, you can't do this thing on ChatGPT with the greatest respect to the app, but you need a lawyer. You need an M&A lawyer who has structured M&A deals. You want him to be able to analyze the service contracts of the company that they have with suppliers and buyers and employees. You want the accountant to look at the numbers that they have. I mean, you want the corporate finance guy and the lawyer to look at the bank documents. You want the corporate finance backing you up in the deal and analyze the deal. You need a healthcare operations guy or whichever industry you're getting into to be able to look at the deal and assess whether this is a good deal or not. And you want these people to perform a risk analysis on the deal and incorporate those risks into the deal structure. This is a complicated process. Even one person who has expertise in one function will not be enough. And if you don't have any experience, getting into this without a board is going to a war without an army, or advisors, experienced generals. So you want that on your side. You cannot do this without building a board. It's irresponsible. Recently, one of the guys reached out to me, and he's been doing this for the last few years. Without a mentor, without any advice, he acquired some small companies, and these are his words. He acquired some small companies that were going down, probably loss-making businesses, for a couple of $1,000s. And he thought he's in acquisitions. I don't know if you could buy a company for a couple of $1,000s. Of course, I know that you can. I've met people who bought company for $0. If it's a loss-making company and they have to spend money to keep this going, you can just take it from them. There are some situations like that, but that's not the business we are in. So this guy said that these companies were too small. He got tired of managing. He had to get rid of them, so he didn't create any wealth. And then he started to look at $1 million businesses. That's a good size. So he found $1 million business, and then he went to finance it. And the banker asked him one question: what experience do you have operating these companies? And he goes, none. He says, okay, we are sorry, we can't finance this deal. So you need experience on your board, and he got lucky the bank didn't finance the deal. If the bank did finance the deal, somehow he managed to convince them, he would be at a big risk, because did he evaluate the cash flow of the company properly? Did he evaluate the tax liabilities of the company, legal liabilities of the company? Does he know if the company has litigations going on, operations, So there's a lot of work involved, and you need the board. So that's just an example. And he spent few years doing this, I might add. And then I was so happy to hear that he came to me, because when I say to people that you need a board, a lot of the times they don't believe me, because they had heard somebody say something and then they believe that advice. But to him, I didn't need to struggle, because he had gone through it himself and he had experienced the pain of it. And time is expensive, and he lost a couple of years. So that's a big mistake. That was number 5. Number 6, not going to the bank first. So basically, you skip building the board, you skip the banks, and you go directly to the seller. Big mistake. Why? Because even if you manage to negotiate a deal, and let's say you even have a board and you directly go to the seller to negotiate a deal, how do you negotiate? How do you know what price you can give him, what price not, that you cannot? Because that is the decision that is reserved for the bank. The bank decides what would be the loan on a certain company, how much they can finance. It's the bank's decision, it's not your decision. Yes, you're going to be the owner of the company, but the bank has to finance the deal. So if you don't have any contacts in the bank, if you don't know what deals they can or cannot finance, then what is the basis do you have to go to the seller and offer a price and structure a deal? You don't know, you're guessing. And here is what will happen if you do this. You'll negotiate a deal that the banks cannot finance, and then you'll go to the bank and then receive a bunch of no's. That's not what you want to do. Another scenario is the seller agrees to sell the company and you have a few months to close the deal. Let's say you have 6 months or 8 months if the seller is generous. And this is the time now you're going to make contacts and you're being pushed around through the bureaucracy of the bank, and you don't know what is required to get an approval on $1 million loan or a $10 million loan or a $5 million loan, however big the deal is. So you need, because you don't have any contacts in the bank, so you need to first go to the bank after you build the board and get the lawyers and accountants, and then and find the bankers that can finance different ticket size of deals and ask them the right questions to understand their lending criteria and what deals they can finance, what deals they cannot finance, and how they want the deals to be structured, in what scenario they won't be able to finance, and what do they like, what do they don't like, do they even lend in your sector, what do you have to do to get an approval on $1 million, $5 million, $10 million deal. You need to know all of this information. So you have to go to the banks first to understand their lending criteria. And on that, and you need to have the lending criteria mapped out for each bank, and you have to have the name of each banker listed out. You need to have a big funnel of banks before you start talking to sellers, or at least simultaneously that you're talking to the seller. One of the big superstars of Dan Pena spoke to over 200 banks and 200 bankers, and he has a list of 200 banks and he knows exactly which bank can finance what deal. As a result, he was able to close 24 transactions based on what Dan said. He broke Dan's record. So that groundwork helps. So you need to have contact in the banks before you go to the seller. So that's a big mistake. Going to the seller first is a big mistake. Number 7 is, this is my favorite. The owner is not motivated. So that's number 7, is when the owner is not motivated, he's jerking you around, he's playing with you, he's not in a hurry to close the deal, he's running his business, he's making millions of dollars, he's happy, he never had an intention to sell. And you're talking to him, you're spending all the time, and he's pretending, oh, if it's the right price, perhaps we can consider, and come on that time, come on Tuesday, come on Wednesday, I'm not free on Monday. That's a classic example of a not motivated seller. This guy was never going to sell. And it's very similar to, let's say you own a house. Somebody knocks at your door, you open the door, and they say, hey, listen, we want to buy your house. Are you going to say no? Of course not. You want to know, what's the price? How much are they giving? Maybe these people are stupid and they pay $10 million for this house. I want to know what the price is, right? You want to know what the value of your house is in any given time, whether you want to sell it or not. So you can, you may start pretending, okay, what's your offer? And they say, actually, we don't know what the offer is because we need to study the market. We need to look at the house. We need to see, how big it is, and we need to get our independent auditor or and a guy who does an appraisal, an independent appraiser, to value the property, if you're serious. So, and then you say, oh, if the offer is good, yes, we would be serious. What you're really saying, if the offer is obnoxious, you may just sell it. So this guy spends money, gets the independent appraiser to value the house, and then he comes to you and he says, oh, it's actually $500,000. And then you say, oh, actually, price is not good, and we don't want to sell it. And the guy spent a bunch of money to do the valuation, spent maybe a few months, and you never wanted to sell in the first place. But the same thing happens in business acquisitions. You meet a bunch of people that mislead you, that waste time of your board members, and the board members get exhausted. You waste your time, and your hopes and dreams get attached to a deal, one deal. So that happens because the seller is not motivated. You don't want a seller that's not motivated. The guy has to have gray hair, above 50 minimum, ideally as late in his life as possible. And you have to clearly be able to see this guy is desperate. This guy is on his knees. He can't go on. He has to sell. And then you have a different situation. So you have to be able to identify a motivated seller from a non-motivated seller, and you'll save a lot of time. Number 8, wrong board member. Oh, I've been through this. You'll meet some alligators in your business journey that want to suck your blood, to be honest, and they're going to destroy everything because they're driven by toxic emotions, with jealousy, and your position being a major shareholder can invite a lot of jealousy because these people can project. Not all are bad, a lot of them are good, but some of them can be bad for you. They're not successful in life for whatever reason, and they prey on you. They don't like that you have a lot of equity. They don't like that you are young. They don't like that you're going to be making a lot of money. They don't like that you have power, and they're going to move against you. They're going to conspire against you. So that's one example of a bad board member. Another one would be that he's not qualified. He may have the biggest credentials, but if you put him to action, he's not able to do the job. So one time this happened. I was with a meeting with a seller, $3.5 million company, and I convinced him for a seller finance transaction on a dinner. And immediately, and I was with somebody, a board member, and he immediately jumped into the conversation, and he said, oh, we can't do a deal without the cash. It's illegal. And I said, no, it's not illegal. Seller finance is not illegal. It's legal. He said, no. It's illegal. What are you saying? And he started to say this in front of the seller. And the seller started to look at both of us. And I look bad because the seller thinks that I proposed something illegal. And the seller started to get extremely skeptical with me. And I had to manage the situation. Then the meeting got over and he talked to me. He said, it's not legal, And I said, no, we need to talk to our lawyer. You're not a lawyer, you're a corporate finance person. We need to talk to a lawyer and we need to get proper advice. And he says, no, you're getting proper advice. You're not listening to me. And I said, it's done all over the world. Houses, it happens in real estate, it happens in business, it happens in machines, happens all over the place. He's like, no, you know what you said. And I said, what nonsense is this? 1 year later, I proposed the same structure at the board. I ran it down again. And he said, that's legal. Yeah. I've seen an example like that. And then, and that happened after a day. So I presented the structure. Next day, he actually read online, or he went and he looked at his books. He called a couple of his associates and he said, that is, legitimate, and that's, that works. And he sabotaged that deal. So that's a wrong board member. He was not qualified, or he didn't understand the full dynamics, and that was a big problem. So that's and that was my fault, because I should have fired him that day. So if you have a wrong board member, they need to go as early as possible. So I was procrastinating on that because I didn't want to fire him. He was in his 50s, and it was something that, and he was adding value in some sense, and but he was the wrong board member. So you have to fire them, otherwise your project can get sabotaged. So that's an example of a wrong board member. That's mistake number 8. Number 9 would be not doing due diligence and acquiring the wrong company. And this is a little bit linked with building a board, because if you don't have a board, you don't have the ability to do due diligence, because you don't have the eyes, to look at the deal. There is a certain orientation that you need, certain education that you need to be able to assess a deal, and that can be developed. But it's far better that you have an expert on your team from different backgrounds to be able to look into the deal and do proper due diligence. And there is a whole focus that I see these days, which is on acquiring a company fast. Fast. It's all about doing your first deal fast. Well, speed is not our goal. Quality is. You want to acquire the right company, yes, as soon as possible, but the right company. It can't be something that was just abruptly done. You missed the details, you walked over a lot of details, and that's called negligence, and you put yourself in not a good position. This is about creating wealth, and wealth is built when you do good deals, when you do the work. And as my mentor Dan Pena says, the more you investigate, the less you have to invest, because we live in a world where images rule everything. The appearance of things rules everything. So people don't want to look beneath the surface. You always want to look beneath the surface, and you want to investigate before you invest, because then you can value what you're looking at properly. It's like the girl that you meet in a club. She's all decked up, makeup, everything, and you think she's a princess. And let's say you get into a relationship, she washes her face, she looks totally different. And she has a lot of bad habits, and her health is not in a good condition. She just looked good that one night. So that's an example. I know it's a funny analogy, but what the hell. So that's falling for the appearance of things. Same thing happens in business. Everything looks great from outside. Range Rovers parked outside. You go in, you have to look beneath the surface. You have to be able to investigate, and then the actual value of the company. Then you can perform an actual assessment and make an offer. So due diligence is an important aspect. Number 10, paying all cash up front. So if you are in a service business where human beings are involved in performing the service, you don't have a lot of plants, it's not a steel mill or an oil mill. It's a service business like a dental clinic or a plastic surgery clinic, where a lot of the revenues come from a few people. And it's called a key man risk. And it's a really people-driven business. Service businesses are people-driven, like lawyers, accountants, doctors are generally service-oriented. So what happens is that if you pay all the cash up front, then the seller has got what he needed, and he doesn't need to keep the business going. He can just walk away. Or he could open another company just like that, sell you the license of the company or the shares, and form a new company and just move all his employees in that company and all his customers also. So what do you have left? Nothing. Because he's taken all the employees and customers, and he emailed all the customers that, we have opened a new location, our location has moved. And you don't have a business, and you paid $1 million for this. So that's why it's important that you don't pay all cash up front. You have to hold back some cash, and then you have leverage. And you also have to make sure that you have his interest aligned with your interest or the interest of your company. And then you can trust him. When interests are aligned, only then you can trust people in business. I may be a little bit negative here, but you can trust people when your interests are aligned. When the interests is not aligned, when you're in a conflicting position, you cannot trust the person. So you can't give all the cash of 100% up front because you don't know if the owner is going to run away or not. There is no incentive for him to stay. But if you acquire 60% and he stays for 40%, you both are in the same boat. And you can protect a lot of risk just with that one structure, where you pay 60% cash, and also so he still needs to receive $400,000 from you, or 40% of the cash. So when that happens, he acts properly. He's not going to disrupt the business, and especially if that 40% of the business of the company he holds, if it can have a lot of value in the future, let's say in 5 years, then he will really make sure that the business goes well, and that's what you want. So you want the interests aligned. For that, you can't pay all the cash up front. It has to be 60-40 is the classic structure. 11. Board members meeting prematurely. And this is something that is disastrous, to your position. If the board members meet prematurely, you are at a severe risk of getting fired. Yes, they would meet eventually at the right time when you have certain things lined up. I can't get into that here in the public forum, but you need to have certain things lined up. If they meet prematurely, they don't need you. It's like a broker introduces the real estate owner and the buyer, and then he says, oh, you guys can talk and I'll go. And he has no contract signed with both of them. Now, if I'm the buyer and the seller is in front of me, I'll just do a deal directly. I don't need to involve the broker. So it's important. So that's why he if he's a good broker, he would have signed a mandate with the owner, or he will not give me the phone number. He will be there in every single meeting, so he makes sure he doesn't get cut out. The same thing happens in this. If they know what the deal is, if they know each other prematurely, then they don't need you. They will just say, why do we have to give him 60%? We all know each other. Thank you for introducing all of us, and you can leave. Don't let the door hit you on your way out. Chop, chop, go. And thank you for connecting us. So you can't do that. And I remember one guy who reached out to me a couple of years ago on LinkedIn, and he was like, why don't you advise me? I said, you'll have to sign up. At that time I was consulting very few people, just Braulio actually, my other client. And this guy said, you know what, it's fine, I don't need your advice. I already have a board and we are having regular board meetings. And I said, okay, fine, good for you. He maybe had some bitterness in him, but he said, I have a board now and we're meeting regularly and we're discussing deals. I said, okay, I'll just wait till you get fired, because you don't make the board members meet prematurely. There is a timing to that. There are certain aspects that need to be lined up, and it has to be done in a certain format. And then you can retain your position, you can have control over your board, because it's your project, you're building it, you're working on it full time. These people should support you, aid you, and these people are your advisors. You have to treat them with respect, but there is a time where you meet. So, and my final point, number 12, is not having a mentor. Okay, this is a complex project with many moving parts, and if one thing goes wrong at step 1 or step 2, the effect of that will not be immediate. You will see something burst or see some breakdown much later on, something getting disrupted on the 8th step or 9th step, and that's the nature of it. Just like this guy was having board meetings without fully understanding the implications of what he's doing. Nothing may happen for many months, but then when he started bringing the deals, on the last day of the board meeting, he could get fired and they can just take control of the company. So it's important to have a mentor. It's important to have proper advice and somebody guiding you. It's going to be a lot more easier for you to build this project and to do things properly. So if you're interested in getting mentored by me, I have 2 mentorship programs. One is the one-on-one and the other one is group. It happens over 24 months currently, and I stay involved throughout the process. So this is not where you receive the information, you do it on your own. You receive the information for the relevant step that you're doing, and it's an ongoing process. And I advise you on an ongoing basis as you're building the project with proper feedback. And it's producing some good results. Last year, the two people that signed up. Joseph has recently built his board. You know, all high-profile guys have done billions of dollars in deals. These people that he brought together have done, you know, advised on billions of dollars in deals. He has top advisors, and he recently closed a top law firm on a $250,000 delayed fee, and he's in his 20s. So, and he didn't have an experience before this. Another one of my clients, he has gotten a very senior executive in Coca-Cola on his board, along with many other high-profile guys that have been involved in billions of dollars in transactions. Both of these people are in US, and they're on their way to putting themselves in the position to start looking for companies, million-dollar companies. So I've been doing this for a while. If you're interested, reach out to me and we will discuss. If you like the video, hit that subscribe button, and I'll talk to you soon.